All right, everyone, today we're going to be discussing the amazing concept and maybe slightly non-traditional concept of mini retirements. We're doing that with the host of the amazing podcast, Everyday Courage. And let me just set the frame for this. Let's just establish maybe these 4 lanes that people find themselves when they start considering the topic of retirement. The regular path, which is you can retire, never. The Susie Orman path, which maybe is like a half a degree better, which is you're allowed to retire when you're 85 years old or when you have $80 million, whichever comes first. Financial independence, which says, okay, you can actually achieve retirement over an intermediate time period. That's the 3 that kind of we talk about, right? You don't need to wait until your golden years. You can do this over an intermediate time period, reclaiming decades of your life. But what if there was something else? What if there was something that we're able to provide for us the opportunity not to wait until this intermediate time period to experience a taste of this alternate lifestyle? What if there was a way that we were able to introduce this sooner? Hence the importance for this conversation about mini retirements. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is Choose FI.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, very excited to dive into this week's topic, talking about mini retirements. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. Yeah, anytime we have Jillian on the podcast is a good day. So this should be exciting just generally. But mini retirements, this is something that has always intrigued me. I read about it for the first time in the 4-Hour Work Week, probably 10 years ago with Tim Ferriss. And he talked about setting up these little times off. And dreamlining, I think, is what he referred to it as. Like, what if you thought a little bit differently? What if that amazing trip that previously would have only been a handful of days, what if you could take 2 months, 3 months to do this? And naturally, the questions arise. How could I do that? How could I leave my job? How could I ever afford that, right? And when you think through it, okay, maybe I can overcome some of these issues. And I'm just so fascinated to talk to Jillian about this because she has lived this multiple times. And frankly, I don't know anybody else who has done this that many times. So this should be exciting. So Jillian, with that, welcome back to Choose FI.
Thank you, guys. It's always fun hanging out with you.
It's going to be fun today, too. Let's start with this little origin topic of mini retirements in your own path to financial independence. At what point on your path or trajectory to FI did you have the courage to pull this off?
We first started thinking about it. It was the very first year we were married. We just celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary, which I also got married at 19. So it's my half-life anniversary. I've been married half of my life to this guy, which is a little crazy. But half of my life ago, I started reading like the Old Testament. They talk about the Sabbath year. So we're like, on the 7th day, you have a Sabbath day. On the 7th year, you were supposed to have a Sabbath year. And like everybody took the year off. Collectively, all the animals, all the fields, all the people. And I thought, well, that's awesome. I love that idea. And so I told my husband, I remember we were driving down this little dirt road in Idaho. And I was like, we should do that. And he was like, oh, sweetie, I don't think that people actually do that anymore. Like it's not like a thing. And I was like, but it could be, we could do it. Maybe we just like save just a little bit more money. And he was like, I don't know. He was not fully convinced. He had a lot of logistical, pragmatic questions, but it just inspired me on the idea, especially for us. I mean, like $12,000 that first year. We were $55,000 in debt. The idea of early retirement, I was like, well, that's not happening. Like that's not in the cards. So how can we experience these moments and these experiences that are going to happen along the way? Because the other option was kind of that we can wait till we're 65 and try to see if we can hoard all these amazing experiences till then. But some things expire.
Jillian, I love that. You're, what, about 2,000 years behind the curve there?
Yeah, but a little old school with the idea.
But no, it's a great idea. And I mean, I think your husband's reaction would have been my reaction. Like, oh, we can't do that. Here's a laundry list of reasons why, like, that's not acceptable by society. What are you going to do with your job? Like, I mean, how did you think about a lot of those? Because I'm sure those questions, well, I'm not sure, but maybe those questions came up in your own mind. Like, how did you think through that to, okay, this is totally impractical, to, oh, wow, maybe this is practical enough that I can bring this up in conversation, not less actually pull the trigger on it?
I think being naive and ill-informed helped. It helped fuel my enthusiasm because it just seemed like, well, why not? That's easy enough. You just save a little money, leave your job, come back to your job. Like, we were young, married. We didn't even have healthcare. So like all of those very like pragmatic grown-up concerns, I just didn't have yet. At this point, we were living in a really old beat up camper that I had paid for with cash. And so like my needs threshold was pretty low. I was like, I can do anything. When you don't feel like you need a lot or you need a lot of luxury, like the whole world feels possible.
There's clearly a lot that we need to cover. And I would almost challenge people to pause this episode and write down all the reasons it won't work for you now. Just write them down. I mean, that's fair. Just, take 5 minutes and come back. But I want to just point out to you, there was something you said there that is an eternal truth. And it's just pointing out this observation. Are you personally, as an individual, in a situation where you own your stuff or your stuff owns you? Your debt owns you, your obligations owns you, your mortgage, all the things that you're financing, all the things that you're entangled in. You can't, even for a week, pull away, 2 weeks pull away, 3 weeks pull away. And if that is the case, you can't have a Red X month. You can't have any version of this at any point in time. Is that going to be a true statement 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20, 30? Like, are you making moves to slowly free up some bandwidth? Are you okay with that as a proposition? So just, as you have this pause and you're making this list of all the reasons it won't work, just think about, is that statement going to be true the whole next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And if the answer to both of those is yes, maybe we could do something now to maybe make some changes. So that just stuck out to me, but you actually were able to pull this off. So the first time around, first year of marriage, you and your husband collectively making $12,000 a year, but you don't owe, well, you actually said you did have debt. You had $55,000 in student loan and debt. So how did you pull this off?
So for us, we started that first year with like a save half mentality, which I think is really common in the FI space. Someone just happened to mention it to me, was like, hey, you guys got married. You should think about just living on one of your incomes. It's a smart choice. And I was like, hey, that sounds fantastic. So we kind of started with that. But this idea of mini retirements, initially, it was just this idea and this dream and kind of this seed. It wasn't a really specific plan. But I found that the more you have kind of this clear vision, this hope, when opportunities arise, when things present themselves, because for a lot of us, oftentimes we'll have a gap in employment for a variety of reasons. And there's a huge difference between sitting on your couch, depressed, not wanting to revamp your resume and watching Netflix and saying, oh my gosh, I have a month, I have 2 months. What's that dream? I'm financially prepared. I'm emotionally prepared. Despite this like sadness of a job loss, I'm ready to pull the trigger and do this amazing thing that I've been thinking about for the last couple of years.
Well, I think we could even expand that. We could certainly talk about this through the lens of exactly how that year went, but just so people kind of appreciate that idea, just generally thinking about the importance of this. This year has been trying for all of us. Some people may have experienced, being laid off. Some people may have experienced loss of life, loss of loved ones. Someone may have experienced just depression that comes with being enclosed, indoors for a very, very long period of time. If you were to build on that, now looking at this through the lens of experience, having done this multiple times, and we'll explore what that looked like for you and what that was, why would you say that this is such an important idea for people to consider?
I think 2020 was so hard. And there's a lot of reasons that now is the perfect time to consider it. One, people are really burned out. Like it was just a stressful, emotionally draining year. And in that chaos, oftentimes you don't want to make big changes. So I think a lot of us, we just put our heads down and we pushed through and we survived. And now we're on the other side. And our priorities shifted a little bit over the year. Our values shifted, our experience shifted, and we said, do we have to go back? I know a lot of people who were able to work remotely for a year and they're like not super excited about that hour and a half commute anymore, actually. Like, really enjoyed my free time without it. And it was kind of, 18 months of missed experiences, of not seeing friends, not seeing family, not traveling. Like, we had to postpone everything. And after such a long postponement, I think a lot of people are in that, could I take a break? Could I go do something? Could I kind of make up for lost time? The economy's doing great. Oftentimes we don't want to like leave our job when unemployment's really high and we're like, I don't know if we can find another one, but unemployment's super low. The economy is doing great. The stock market did really well over the last year. So some people are like, I'm doing a little bit better financially than I was 2 years ago. And so it's just a whole bunch of things kind of coming together that I think as a society at large, more people are considering making a change.
Yeah, Jillian, I love that. To me, that point actually that you just said of, hey, maybe you're years ahead of where you thought you might have been, right? Like when you mapped out your FI plan, if all of a sudden the stock market went up an incredible amount, and to your point, the job market's doing amazing, like people have these fears, right? I know I kind of said that in passing a couple of minutes ago, but like, hey, what's going to happen to my career? Is this going to destroy me? Am I going to find another job? Am I going to have the higher likelihood of getting promoted? Like all of these things go through your mind. Like, am I screwing up? Because frankly, like I know Jonathan had that cool setup of, the Susie Orman plan or the never retire, but like FI gives us hope, right? Just having some certainty that I can retire at some point, probably most likely in the next 10 to 20 years, if that's, when I've found FI. Am I messing that up by doing one of these mini retirements? And I'd love to hear you think through that. Like how would you counsel somebody who says, hey, I only have 12 more years to FI, but I really want to do this. Like, what do I do? What do I think through?
There's a couple factors. One, if we want to do with the money side first, for like coaching clients, I run a lot of financial plans and trajectories for them. It almost never has hardly any impact. Like, it's shocking that you can take 3 months off, 6 months off, and you look at kind of your total net worth when you're 90. And the difference is not minuscule, but not relevant. I'd say, okay, so if you take a year off, you do this amazing thing, you have these great experiences with your family. That means instead of retiring with $7 million, you're going to retire with 6. When you're 85, let's think about the value of that extra million versus the value of this experience. When you're 85, which one do you think you would have rather have had? And like weigh them together. If we're talking about dollars and cents, like weigh the value of that. What would you do with that extra million when you're 80? And most people are like, I don't know, donate it. Like, I don't need that. I need 3 million. So if I have 7 versus 6, it's not really consequential.
I think we have multiple billionaires, 85-year-old billionaires on the record saying I would give away all my billions to go back and be 25 again. Like that's time is your most precious resource. We know that. We love that as a community. So now it's all right. Well, what are the implications of that with how we want to map out what we want to do with our life? So, inception's dangerous, right? You plant this seed and then suddenly you nurture it. And at some point it manifests. But what's cool is you can nurture the idea for free. You can nurture the idea for free and you can work towards that from a financial planning perspective, which we'll come back to, which I'm sure your husband, Adam, really wanted some insight on. Like, let's just make sure this is going to be okay. But even more than that, before you even get to that point, if you decide to take this super big, ambitious 3 months, 6 month, 1 year mini retirement, what are you going to do with all that free time? Because, if you just take the mini retirement to then catch up on Netflix, the decision-making has really gone badly here.
Yeah, it's important to start crafting that vision. And for people who are interested in the idea of early retirement, the reality is it's actually a pretty tough thing to pull the trigger on. To go from working and saving and investing super aggressively, it's like driving 80 miles an hour down the freeway, and then to pop that puppy in reverse is kind of a rough transition. But there's all these things that people want to do. They want to get in better shape. They want to travel. They want to have more time with their kids. They want to explore hobbies and interests and projects and volunteering. we can take a little sample of that and experiment with it throughout your working career. Give you kind of a test run, give you a practice, because then when it's time to pop that thing in reverse, you have a little bit more confidence of like, I know how this is going to go. I know it's going to go well. I've practiced, I've trained, I've had these experiences. Like I know what I'm retiring to. One of the things oftentimes people don't consider, especially when they're going really hard towards early retirement, is they don't have a lot of time to test out all these things that they say they want to do because they're just so committed to their careers. And it's like, just keep your head down, push through a couple more years. The reality is, if you've ever started new projects or new hobbies, typically we don't like most of them. Like that's just the nature of it. We have like a 30% success rate. So you think, I really would love to clean out my garage. And it turns out you don't actually love cleaning out your garage. You think, I would love to run a marathon. Then you realize, actually, I don't love running that much. And that's okay. But if you're testing out 20 things that first year of retirement and you hate 16 of them, it leaves people with the feeling of, why did I even leave my job? What am I even doing? Why did I give up all of that money to just not like any of these things I thought I would like? It can be really disappointing. So it's better to like practice it a little bit, explore it a little bit before you get to this huge life transition.
Yeah, Jillian, this is a critical concept. There's no question about it. And this kind of transcends mini retirements, right? Like clearly we can talk about it with the lens of that, but even just testing things out without leaving your job, right? Just testing out, hey, what do I like? Maybe, people have these dreams, to your point. I don't know that anybody's necessarily dreaming of cleaning out their garage, for all of retirement, but, maybe they're thinking about RVing around the country or, living on a boat for the next 8 months or 8 years, right? And maybe they've never lived on a boat for even 1 or 2 days. So I would probably advise testing that out, and it sounds elementary when we're talking about it, but people have these dreams and they don't actually find out, will I enjoy that? Do I enjoy that? And I would love to hear, maybe you talk through like comparing and contrasting like the concept of trying these things out in mini retirements versus just like in the course of regular life. Like, is there a place for somebody listening to this episode who's saying, all right, I'm not sure that mini retirement's necessarily going to work for me, but I would love to test some of this stuff out. Like, how would somebody think through that?
I always think it's important to test as much as you possibly can in your regular life. Many retirements come in and that there's some things that are too big to test in a week or 2 weeks. If your plan is to slow travel through Europe, you can't really go and test that over a 10-day vacation just by the nature of it. And so there's some things that are just a little bit too big to fit into a 2-week vacation. And to some things you can like nurture up to a certain point, but then you just need a bigger chunk of time to really dive in and see if this is something you want to do. And mini retirements fill that need. I always prefer if people don't start like a cold start. The metaphor I use, because I love gardening, is if you have a garden box, a very finite amount of time and energy and money, but in your garden box, you just have work. It's one gigantic plant. It's a shrub that takes up the whole thing, and you don't have space to grow anything else. You don't have space for other things to grow bigger. If possible, like start those little seedlings, on your window shelf, because what can happen is then you retire and you pull out this huge shrub and you got a patch of dirt and it feels really lonely and it feels really empty. And if you've ever started plants from seed, the start of that is watering a big patch of dirt for quite a while you're waiting for these plants to grow up. So as much as possible, if we can trim back work so we can at least start these other little plants growing a little bit, these other pillars of meaning. That way, when you pull out that big shrub, at least you got something going in there, something that now needs that space and that time and that energy to grow and to flourish.
So, Jillian, if we're looking at this garden box, we're thinking about, all right, let's start planting some seeds. I think that visualization is going to be the key for this. But if work is all consuming, sometimes it's hard for us to really, when we get a piece of white paper and we're trying to write this stuff out, for us to actually commit to what we would do in the absence of work. because we're so used to thinking about it. You have 1 week a year, maybe 10 days. And with that, you just go to the beach and that's it. Like if you have a larger window, I don't know. It actually scares me to think about. So how do we, what are the bullet points or the bubbles that we should start to fill in when we are trying to fill out this kind of dream board?
Yeah, I use two tools with my coaching clients to kind of just help them get all of this a little organized in their head. And one of it is, what's your ideal day and what's your ideal week? Like mapping out a schedule from the time you wake up. If you could make it anything you want to make it, what would that look like? How many hours of sleep would you get? How would you eat breakfast? What would you spend in the morning? Would you exercise? Is there time with family? Is there time with friends? Is there hobbies in there? What does that actually look like? And then on a weekly basis, what would that ideal week look like? Do you have outings and adventures? Do you have religious activities? Is there volunteering? So that's one that can just kind of help start you imagining what this time off could look like and give you a little bit of structure to what am I going to do with these gigantic days?
Let me add in there. I just real quick. I did this exercise with my wife a while back, and the first thing she came back to me with as we started to do it was she started to write down not her ideal day, but her current obligations. And I want to just point out that this is not what are your current obligations, right? There's a distinction here.
Yeah. It's so easy to get sucked into what we should do, what we need to do, and never actually ask ourselves, what do we want? What do we desire? Because for a lot of us, we survived by ignoring what we want and ignoring what we desire and just focusing on what other people expected us to do. And so it takes a little bit to shift kind of that mind of, well, what would I want my life to look like? So that's the first exercise. It can be helpful, just like a real quick brainstorm. The next exercise, we like to take a piece of paper. I love Post-it notes. I'm obsessed. So I like to use Post-it notes. But at the top, you write the words identity, activity, and possession. This is something sometimes they do at retreats too, to kind of just help everyone start brainstorming this. How would you describe your identity? What would you want your identity to be? Is it a parent? Is it a traveler? Is it a writer? My husband is a car enthusiast. All of those things that you would describe yourself as a person. And then what are the activities that matter to you? Maybe that's exercise or reading or volunteering or traveling or hobbies that you have that you feel like are really important to you. And the third one is possession. And I try to think about what are the things I need to own that ideally facilitate those other two. They facilitate my identity or they facilitate my activity. We love traveling. We love camping. We own a camper. That's a possession that's really helpful for those other two. And it's a great exercise because it's pretty simple. Like even my husband, that's his favorite one of all the life planning stuff to do. He loves this one the most because he's like, yeah, I understand these 3 columns. And you can come up with 5 or 10 or 20 things, but it gives you some clarity of, is this my life right now? Or could I take this time away, a month, a few months, a year, and focus on making this ideal day and these 3 categories a little bit more true? Because sometimes even though we have these things, we can feel that there's a disparity. Maybe you say, I'm a creative and I'm a writer, but you don't actually write because it's not in your current day. Oh, I have one more thing in the dreaming and the planning, and that is what might expire over the next 5 to 10 years. Like there's seasons in life that aren't forever. They're not permanent. There are moments and experiences that have an expiration date. We took a 10-week road trip with our 5 kids in a pop-up camper, and we did 10 national parks. And it was such an amazing trip. But I felt like that season was about to expire. Like this wasn't something, my kids were like 3 to 11 at the time. I wasn't like, we can just do this in 10 years. Like that'll work. We'll just wait until 10 or 15 years. Like my kids would not want to do a pop-up camper to 10 national parks when they're in their 20s with me. Like they'd be like, no, thanks, Mom. Nice try. You missed the boat there. So are there things that are going to expire, whether it's like maybe time with your parents, that they're getting older, or time with family members, or when your kids are younger, that you're like, if I don't do it now, your own health, maybe. If I don't do it now, if I don't hike the Appalachian Trail now, that window is expiring. I'm not going to do this at 70. So kind of when I'm thinking about what my next mini retirement's going to be, I think about what is reaching its expiration date.
And Jillian, I really like this concept of just allowing yourself to want something,
Mhm.
right? Allowing yourself to dream. Because, to Jonathan's point, when he asked his wife, like, she started listing obligations. That's what I would do. I can guarantee you that. So that hits very, very close to home. But what would this look like if you could do anything you wanted? Like, that is really powerful. And most of us could go through a 10-year span and never actually think about what we want. What would life look like if it could be great, if it could be different, if it could be fun, if we could do something outside of the box? So, yeah, I mean, I love this concept. And again, it hits very close to home for me
Yeah.
because I've got a laundry list of obligations. It would be pretty cool to dream.
I just want to point out, as a follow-up to what you just said about that conversation with my wife, because that was a real conversation. I saw the light bulb go off after I pushed, back on that idea. I know, Danny, what is it that you actually want? Like, what would, not what you have to do or what it is now, but like, what would you like your day to look like? And like, it really legitimately took a while for her to even be able to think that way. But after we did it, clearly not everything was going to be possible. But even in the confines of just a regular work week, we were able to find 3 or 4 things that she could center around her week. And even as I'm saying this, I'm recognizing those things that she wanted, they stayed in place for 3 or 4 months. But right now, at the point of this conversation, they're not happening. And I was thinking about that and I was like, they could totally still happen, but they just didn't, because even a dream that you have that you hold as important, over time, life gets in the way. So this isn't a conversation that you just have once in the context of, let me do this one big trip, but you might need to readdress, maybe even on a twice a year or annual basis, just to remind yourself, you can have what you want. What do you want?
Yeah. One of the most interesting parts of coaching for me is diving into people's hesitations and challenges, because you get to hear what's actually holding people back. And they're very honest, vulnerable conversations that oftentimes you don't get to have with friends and family. And I always tell people to be really pay close attention, do kind of the shadow work on what that internal dialogue is. And sometimes we'll map out what that internal dialogue is. And it sounds like it's things like, well, you just need to be responsible. Like, you just need to suck it up. The whole world isn't here for your enjoyment. What do you think? Not everyone gets what they want. This is life. Like, you need to be responsible. Like, you need to be productive. Don't you want to be like a worthwhile human being? And all of this internal dialogue kind of hinders us from thinking about this. And it's a lot of, I think, society conditioning, consumerism, corporate kind of conditioning. Like, don't acknowledge how you feel. Don't acknowledge what you want. Just accept what you've been given. Just be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for that job. Be content. Like, don't desire everything. And it's important to just be mindful of that internal dialogue that kind of holds us back into living a life that we feel like is the most acceptable for other people instead of something we actually desire.
Yeah, Jillian, this is it's actually perfect timing for me because I've mentioned before I'm a part of a mastermind group with Dominic Cortuccio, who's been a guest on this podcast a number of times, and right now we're doing a 90-day exercise, and it's basically adventures in ... and then you fill in the blank. And for me, it's adventures in life. That was just what came up to me, and it's like I don't ever really think about adventure. I don't think about stepping outside of my day to day, and now I'm just kind of looking for it. And I think this can be really useful for the audience, just as part of this entire conversation we're having here, because it can start with as simple as just looking for adventure in your life. So for me, it was, hey, somebody posted at our pool community that they were teaching people how to play pickleball, which is this like wildly popular game. And I'm like, okay, I have no idea how to play. I've never played before. I'm running the script in my head. Oh, I'm going to be terrible. Oh, I'm going to show up and, embarrass myself, which is ridiculous. I'm in pretty good shape. I'm a decent athlete, but that's the script. And then I just said, to hell with it. I'm going to show up and play. And as simple as that was my adventures in ... life, just looking for something new. Like I saw somebody at the pool who had the telltale signs of that cupping therapy, like what
Oh,
the
yeah.
swimmers do. And I was like, that looks really cool. Like I have no idea what it does, if it's legitimate, if it's total nonsense. But I got the therapist's name, and within 24 hours, I had an hour massage and this cupping therapy. And it was really cool. So I'm taking 2 minutes out of our show here to talk about this because I am the person who needs this the most. Like what you're talking about. Like I desperately need to look outside the box. And I suspect a significant portion of people listening are in the same boat as me. It's like you have your obligations, you have your day-to-day life, you have the, schedule that you need to drive your kids to and from, X activities, and you don't allow yourself to think like Jonathan's wife, Danny, outside of those obligations. Sometimes it's just cool if you can just change your perspective that tiny little bit just to look for something new.
And framing things instead of like, I would like to do this. What if you had to? Like, what if you had to make it work? How would you? And it activates a problem solving part of us. Like our next mini retirement we're planning, we're probably going to go, I haven't 100% decided, either Costa Rica or Portugal for a couple months. And we're going to take our kids out of school in the middle of the year. And the reason I haven't done this trip before is because I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work. There's just so many logistical components of it that are really challenging. And I still don't exactly know how to make it work with the school. We still have to have conversations. But what if I had to? What if for whatever reason I had no choice? I had to be in Costa Rica those months. It was absolutely essential. I would figure it out. I mean, there is a solution. Sometimes the solutions aren't obvious, but if you have to figure it out, you can.
Hey, this is Andrew from the Choose FI team. Hope you're enjoying the interview. We're going to get right back to it right after these quick messages.
I think with what you've just set up, this activity, we're talking about identity, activity, possession, as you start to think about that, it's going to give us the opportunity to fold some of these other ideas in, whether we're talking about big goals or projects, trips, activities we want to take. This really does now start to inform how long of a period of time do we want to dream about? Is this just a 2-week thing? Is this a 2-month thing? Is this a 1-year sabbatical? And then also now, how would our day and week be structured? I mean, just putting all of this wrapper around it, like, this is the dream part of this activity. But to your point, and to Adam's point, your husband Adam's point, and to all the people out there that maybe took me up on my offer earlier on in this episode, all the reasons it won't work, great. We didn't start with all the reasons it wouldn't work. We started with, what do we want? What do we want for this season? But now it's, now that we have that, now that we're more clear on that vision, let's work forward. How can we afford this? Or can we afford not to, right? There is some contrast there. So Jillian, as we move into the financing aspect of this, I'd love to see how you approach this conversation with Adam.
I think the first thing that stresses people out the most, especially in the FI space, we're like, okay, we can come up with $5,000. We can come up with $10,000. Like that's not an insurmountable issue for us. For most people, the first issue is employment. I need a job after this. And there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of insecurity of, what if I can't get a job? What if it takes too long? I have this huge lapse in my career. What if I'm not employable? Because they're not FI yet. So they need to go back to work. And especially for us who lived through like the 2008 recession, where it was so hard and so scary. And we knew so many people who got laid off and couldn't find work. It's kind of like, I really don't want to experience that again. And I love this topic of employment because for most people, it's the most surprising. So many good things come out of this that they never would have anticipated. So one of my number one tips for people who are thinking about like actually leaving their work, they have to separate from their employment. Ideally, you can negotiate this with your work. And right now is the perfect time to negotiate it because companies are doing a lot of weird things. Like they've had to be super flexible and they really don't want to lose employees. And if you kind of stuck through the whole pandemic, companies are willing to do things they've never done. They might be willing to give you 3 months off. And people always come back to me with, oh, that's just not possible. It's not possible in my job. It's not possible in my work. Like they would never allow that. Nobody does that. And I think medically, you can get 12 weeks off, like family medical leave for every company required by law. If you had a heart attack, they would figure it out. If you had a baby, they would figure it out. It is possible. If it had to happen, they could figure it out. It's slightly inconvenient. It's slightly a pain, but it is in the realm of possibility because people have done it. People get cancer. They have to go through chemo. They take a couple months off and the company moves forward irregardless. So ideally, you can negotiate that. But if you can't, for whatever reason, one of the best tricks is to start with like a goodbye email. Ideally, if you have some time, you'll start making connections in your industry, old colleagues, you'll follow up with people. But when you go to separate, you send an email to all of your professional friends, acquaintances in your company, out of your company, and say, hey, I'm off on this amazing adventure. I'm going to be gone for the next 6 months to a year. I'm so excited to come back to this field. I'm so excited to keep doing this work. If you happen to hear of anything while I'm gone, feel free to let me know. And it's crazy because you activate this. There's two things happening. One, people know you're available and they just happen to think of you. They know you're off on this crazy adventure. They see the pictures on Facebook. You're ziplining through Costa Rica. They know you're available. Things happen to pop up and they go, oh, I know who would be perfect for that. And there's also the second thing that happens in that people are very uncomfortable with other people not working.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. You need to get back in the system. Come back in the system.
Yes. It creates a lot of dysregulation for everyone, whether they know this about themselves or not.
I was holding tears of laughter because I could visualize it. Like, you're not allowed to take that time off. Come work at my company.
Yes. And they just feel uncomfortable. And so to ease that discomfort, they will try to pull you back in to jobs so they don't feel uncomfortable with you not working.
100%.
People get, whether it's early retirement, mini retirements, but especially if you frame it with, I'm going to go do this adventure, but if you hear of anything, I'm happy to entertain the thought. People get so many job requests. My husband on this last one, I took a year off. He had never gotten a job request unsolicited, like in his life. All of a sudden, it was like every other month, people were reaching out with better jobs, with better positions, with better pay. And I was like, we should have quit so long ago just to get a better job. It's just a phenomenon that happens so frequently. And honestly, I would say 50% of the time, it's what disrupts early retirement. You've saved all this time. You've planned all this time. You go off to do this thing. You don't like most of the stuff you're trying because that's life. But all these people in your life are like, hey, I know this job. Hey, I have this opening and it's better work and it's better pay. And you think, why am I giving up all this money? And people go back to work.
What you're just pointing out, you've completely pivoted the conversation, but it's fascinating. And we should probably spend 2 minutes here. You're saying that when people try to leave, they get pulled back in. And we're not talking about mini retirement. We're saying they've hit their number. They feel good about it. They walk away and the system says, no, come back. We'll pay you more. We'll give you your wish list of anything you want, any work or circumstances you want. Just come back to the system. Come back over here to employment. You're not wrong. It's an entirely different conversation. And it's the counterpoint to the 1 more year syndrome. But you're right.
Even when I have people negotiate taking time off or negotiate leaving, there is such a tendency to not want change in corporation. It's kind of this avarice of people. It's not quite lazy. They just don't want to expend energy for change. So I say, if you're going to leave your job, especially in corporate culture, tell them early, because typically they will negotiate more pay, early bonuses, more time off, more flexibility if you just agree to stay 6 more months, because it just makes their life easier. They don't want to go through the work of finding someone and hiring someone. So don't spring them like 2 weeks notice, I'm out of here. Like, kind of milk it. If you want to leave in 6 months, create a 6-month runway, because sometimes people are like, oh, my bonus is in March, and so I don't want to really leave in December. I'm like, start telling them in July. Make that part of the negotiation. I will stay until December if I get my March bonus. 90% of the time, clients get it.
Yeah, Jillian, that's interesting, right? You think about people's incentives. That's what was buried in there is like, hey, it's actually easier for them to keep you on, right? Like, you got to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Like, what is their incentive? Their incentive is really to make their life not terrible. By you staying, if they have to pay you a little bit more, in all likelihood, They're just a middle manager. They're not the owner of the company. It's not coming out of their pocket, right? So you think about incentives. And I loved your point from a couple of minutes ago about like what's in the realm of possibility, right? And to think about it like that. And another thing that it brought to mind, and as we've been talking about negotiating, is I think I look at all the emails we get at Choosify. So feedback at choosify.com. I look at every single one. One of the probably top 2 ideas that have resonated with people the most from all of our episodes is the concept of everything is negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
And it spurs people to take action. Just keeping that in the back of their mind that other people are negotiating, other people are asking, hey, is this possible? Right? Just having that as like a bedrock foundational principle of this FI community. I can't tell you how much action it spurs for people. So hopefully everybody listening to this, everything is negotiable. What does it hurt to ask? It never hurts. And you'll be shocked at what you can get when you just ask the question. Like, you're just a good person. You ask, like, hey, what can you do for me? Like, you're on the call with, a representative from, you're paying a bill, right? Like, whatever it may be, your internet or a medical bill. Like, hey, is it possible if I pay in full now? Do I get a discount? Is it possible? Just think about that. Is it possible? And, again, this is a very long, convoluted way of saying that spurs action like I've never seen before. So I love that you're bringing it up here because you don't know what's in the realm of possibility until you ask.
And especially for clients, because I work with a lot of people transitioning either to early retirement or mini retirement. So I do a lot of this corporate kind of negotiation on my client side. If you frame it as, I love this company, I love my job, I want to make your life easier. Here's ways I'm willing to help do that. I really need a break, but I know it's going to be difficult to replace me, find someone to fill my shoes. If you could just give me a 3-month break, I'll come back. I'll make sure everyone's prepared ahead of time. I'll take care of it. I'll come back after 3 months. I'll come back after 6 months. Or I need to leave, but I know this is going to be difficult. I know I have a lot of responsibility. I know I'm like, it's going to leave you high and dry if I just like jump ship here. I'm willing to stay and help ease this transition. I would love it if you could give me my bonus early, approve some longer leave, let me work remote, have a 3-day work week, so I don't have to leave now. Then I can make this transition so easy and smooth for you. And every manager, every person, we just want our life to be easier. Like, we don't want it to be harder. And so if you can bring solutions that make their life easier, it goes really well.
Let me just hop in here and say, sometimes the best thing the manager can do for you is to say no, just flat out no. And if everybody is really paying attention right now, if we go all the way back, we should really just recognize the fact that my quote unquote early retirement story is really a mini retirement story that didn't end. It was a forced function into the next chapter of my life where I asked my manager for extended leave. Now, thankfully, I did not have all the exact verbiage that Jillian just gave me, because maybe I could have, if I had done it in the exact way you just said, maybe they would have said yes. I mean, think about it. It might have been the worst thing that could have happened to me is for them, as if we look at the fork in the road, on the one end, they say yes, and I'm staying one more year in that job because it's safe, steady income coming in an industry that's just a dumpster fire. And on the other end, I never give myself this chance to see, well, what could I do if I'm responsible for building it myself, end to end? I gave myself in my own mind and justified to my wife and to my family and my extended family. I said, I'm going to try something new for a season. And I think there's room here. I think I can prove this out and I can do it in a financially responsible way. If it does not, if I can't justify it, if it doesn't work out, we can always go back, go across the street, go to another employer, change industries, change careers. There's a million other options when you come to that. But if you don't, take this flex, if you will, you're never going to know. You're never going to know. So yes, in a perfect world, the manager says yes. But let's just be very real. If our industry is toxic, if our company culture is toxic, if our job is toxic, but we're just a very nice person trying to be very nice to all, to everyone else, maybe the worst thing they could do for you is to say yes in that scenario. In reality, this is a forcing function for your next chapter.
And it's telling the companies that won't do anything, that won't make any concession, those are the ones you should be thankful when they say no.
Yes, they would make no concessions.
That's not a healthy long-term solution. That's not a long-term healthy career field. The trickier ones are like the really amazing companies that like will do anything to keep you. And then, I have one client going through this. They're restructuring everything. Any job you want, any boss you want, like we'll let you design your dream job. And if the pay is so good and the benefits are, how do you walk away?
You might not, but you still have won in that scenario.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And Jillian, I love when our guests give very specific, actionable details. And there was something you said there. I would love it if you could. ...
Yeah.
That was what I heard. And like, that is a precise line that you can use when you have this conversation with your boss. It reminds me in episode 147, we had Tori Dunlap come on and talk about negotiating salary. And I've had people email me dozens of times, hundreds of times, undoubtedly, saying, hey, I got a $20,000 raise. I got a $15,000 raise because I use those exact words. And when you said that, I would love it if you could. I'm picturing myself sitting on the other side of the table and hearing that and saying, well, of course, like I want to work with you. There was something natural about those exact words. So I just hope everybody heard this. I really wanted to dial in on that.
And if you're going to have this conversation, practice it with another person first. There are so many times I'll tell a client, okay, say what you're going to say to them, to me. And they say it and I'm like, yep, nope, we're not going to say that. Okay, let's rework this. Because sometimes our first response is kind of our internal frustration or irritation or angst. And instead we have to practice radical empathy and really think about our employer, our company. What are their pain points? What are their struggles? What are their aspirations? What do they need? And how can we help them solve that problem in a way that also works for us? And it's just a much better approach, but definitely give it a test run first with another person. Is this good? Because sometimes that first thing that comes out is like, I really hate your management style. And I'm like, oh no, we're not going to lead with that.
So Jillian, as we set up this episode, when we started, we talked about how you were just inspired, biblically speaking, to look into this idea of a sabbatical, look into this idea of a year off. But woven into there, you mentioned that you have done not one or two, but actually 6 of these on your path to financial independence. And knowing that you reached financial independence in your early 30s, I'd love to hear what was the inspiration for these events, what it was, and how it affected your path to financial independence.
Yeah, initially they were moments of opportunity, like we kind of talked about. Sometimes life is unexpected and you have these little pockets of time that you could either say, one of the things I have taught is like having a go bag packed in a metaphorical sense. Like you have the trip planned, you know what it would be, you know how much it would cost, you have the money saved, you get laid off, something happens and you say, I'm ready to go. All of this is planned out. So you don't have to try to do that dreaming and imagining and saving like during this hard season. And one of those, the first situation for me was, I was probably 23 and I'd had a miscarriage. And a lot of people have miscarriages. It devastated me. I was a mess. And I don't know if it was, I'd spent my entire life not feeling my feelings. And then all of a sudden I didn't know how to deal with all of these ones coming to the surface. I don't know if it was a crisis of faith, but it was not pretty. And my employer actually said, you need a month off. Like you need to go and sort this out and figure some stuff because you coming into work like this isn't working for us. And so they gave me a month off, paid. And I said, okay, let's go. And me and my best friend got into my Honda Civic and we drove from DC all the way to Seattle and back in a month. We camped, we saw family, we saw friends, we explored national parks. Like it was such an amazing experience. And when I talk about short seasons, that's not something I would ever do again. 1, I have 5 kids. 2, I don't sleep on frozen ground anymore. That was totally a 20s thing and I'm over it. Like I don't sleep in my car when it's snowing anymore. Like there's lots of things that I have moved past in my life, but I'm so glad we experienced it then. It was one of the first times that I actually took time to process things and to grieve. I had lived or perhaps survived my whole life up into that point by not feeling, by pushing everything down, by ignoring things that were difficult, ignoring things that were painful. But it was kind of a turning point for me of, oh, new emotional health is going to look like exploring and giving space for hard things.
And Jillian, as you were mentioning that, what just I think is important for people to hear, there are so many different reasons that this concept is important. It could be as a way of absorbing or dealing with grief, very real grief or trauma or stress. And it could also be a point of celebration or a point of just taking a step back to reassess. It's not that it's because life is all, roses, and it's not because life is all grim and a dark outlook. Rather, it's just taking a step out of whatever the day-to-day is and then being able to accurately assess how do you want to re-enter, hopefully on your terms. And, as you look at, I know you've done, and I said this slightly inappropriately, you've done 5 and you're planning your 6th. Do you have any others that you would want to mention in light of what I just said?
One of the ones that was so special for me, like I mentioned, when we were in college, I was living in this really crappy camper. I had bought that camper with cash. And the cash I bought that camper with was actually money I had saved throughout high school to travel to Europe. And my plan was to spend 3 months traveling Europe. I was living with a guy at the time. I eventually realized he's kind of a bummer. I don't think I'm going to go to Europe with him. So I was like, I'll go by myself. And then instead, I went to Bible college. I bought this camper. I met my husband. Fast forward 5 years. We had the opportunity for him, there again, he wanted to leave the military. And they said, please don't go. Please don't go. We'll give you any duty assignment in the world, any open duty assignment, if you stay on for 4 more years, which felt like an offer we couldn't refuse because I had had this dream all throughout high school of traveling Europe. So we picked a spot, Heidelberg, Germany, middle of Europe, and we lived there for 4 years. And so I decided to take this time off. My husband had saved up a bunch of vacation days and we traveled every month. We did a 4 or 5 day trip every month. We would take 2 or 3 week trips. We traveled through 27 countries. And instead of going by myself as an 18-year-old and just being lonely in Europe, I got to go with my husband and my kids and explore this as an adult. And I took German classes and I took history classes and I took art classes. I studied Van Gogh in Amsterdam and I studied expat literature in Rome and poetry in Scotland. I had all of these amazing experiences. But there again, it was just that seed that I had held on for so long. And then an opportunity came up and I said, I'm ready. We're ready. We've saved the money. We've paid off the debt. Let's do it. And so that one was really kind of a long-held dream special. Financially, my husband took 6 months off, 2012, when we moved back to the States. And because he wasn't working, instead we decided to buy and renovate our first house. So we paid cash for that first house. It was really important that he wasn't working because we had never renovated anything. And there was no Chip and Joanna Gaines there to help us. It was just us and YouTube videos, not knowing what the heck we were doing. So it took a lot of time and it was tough. But we finished that first one and he still had some time off. And we said, let's buy a rental. Let's buy another one. Let's do it again. And those 2 houses are both now rentals for us. They've appreciated $400,000.
Wow.
They provide 30% of our FI income. And I look at each of those 5 mini retirements, and in each one, there were things I didn't expect. There were moments of growth and opportunity and experiences that I never would have seen coming, but all of them feel very instrumental in my life. And there's a temptation when you look at mini retirements of what am I going to miss out on? Will it postpone my FI date? Will I miss out on career advancement? But there's something very real that happens when you take time away. You create that space and it allows good things to flow into your life.
Yeah, that is so powerful. You simply cannot account for serendipity, right? Mm-hmm. There's no way to account for that. Unexpected opportunities. I think that's been a theme of what we've talked about this entire hour, right? Hey, when you reach out to all the people you know in your industry or you've ever worked with, and then these random jobs just kind of keep on flooding into you, right? Those are unexpected opportunities. You have no sense of, hey, this 6 months that Adam took off turned into something transformative for you financially. Mm-hmm. I mean, that has made your FI life dramatically easier and quicker to get there, right? Like that's unexpected because he
Yeah.
learned a skill. You learned a skill. You guys learned how to fix up houses. That's remarkable. Like who knows what that list could be for any of us, that if we just take a step outside of our day to day, what could be that unexpected opportunity? It's unknowable.
One of the most unexpected things, and it still cracks me up. At 32, we hit 5. We had gone from 1 kid to 5 in 2 years, and we were just tired. Like it was a lot. A lot had happened. We decided to take a year off, kind of like Jonathan, except with less of a plan. We're like, we just need a break. We need a year off. And so we made a list of all the things that we want to do. And like I said, most of the things that you put on the list, you don't actually want to do. My husband had like learn how to smoke meat. He does not smoke meat now. This is something we've abandoned. But on this list, I wrote something to do with writing. That was it. That was the big idea, the big vision, something to do with writing. And now 6 years later, like I'm about to publish my first book and like I have this amazing job that I've created for myself that like I never would have imagined. Something to do with writing was very vague and it was like one of 100 things we were going to explore. But creating that time and space, it transformed into something that's like, it's more than I ever would have dreamed.
Yeah. And you don't start with a business plan. You start with a dream, but you got to give yourself a little space to really seed it, right? And bring it to life.
Yeah.
For people listening to this, I have a suggestion. One is take this episode seriously. Like this is more than an outlier. I think people that recognize that they got different results, got those different results because they gave themselves time to take something that was just an idea and turn it into action. It's worth some time. It's worth some time to consider what a version of this might look like in your life. And to be honest with you, some of you, even after going through this exercise, maybe you're taking it very seriously, but you're also very scared and nervous about this. Let me just encourage you. It's easier to bring this idea into reality when you're surrounded by other people that are either actively pursuing this idea or who have done it. And with that in mind, if you're in the FI community, generally you have access to these types of people. When you go to events, physical meetup events, you increase the likelihood of running into people that have done this. And on that, I just want to add one additional note. Jillian does a conference each year, and it's called Adventures to FI. And this year, I am so excited to announce that I'm going to be joining her. And I would imagine that we are really going to be focusing on this topic. And I would imagine that this event is going to fill up with people that are very enthusiastic about this exact concept, this exact idea of fleshing out and taking action on their mini retirement. And Jillian, I believe there is still some availability left on this conference. I'd love for you just to take a minute or two to do 2 things with this. One, tell people just a little bit about this event, what the goals are and how people can find that. And then also, I know you've put together a resource for people that just want to just go through this exercise on their own, maybe with their loved one, their spouse, their partner. I know you've got a resource for people just to actually go through some guided exercises.
Yeah, I'm so excited about the event this year. The last one was amazing. And one of the things that makes this event really unique, it's only half teaching from the front of the room. Like a lot of events you go to and you just hear people talk and it's cool talks. This one, we break into small groups a lot. We do masterminds. Like you get to workshop your dreams and your goals and your challenges, and you get to know the other attendees in a very different way. And since our last one, a lot of them still do little mastermind calls every month. A lot of them still keep in touch. Like they've developed this network of like-minded people who are doing cool, interesting things that are outside the norm. And they have that support of other people who are like, that's an amazing idea, instead of, oh, sweetie, what the hell? Why would you do that? Which is the response I typically get from family and friends whenever I'm like, I have an amazing idea. And so it's diving into not so much budgeting and things like that, but thinking about this FI life and how do we build a life that's meaningful and enjoyable and figure out the money on the way to that and after. So it's really fun. It's in Montana. We're at a beautiful lodge. It's like just the most picturesque thing. So it's a really fun experience. And yeah, if you are interested in mini retirements, you can go to jillianjohnsrud.com/mini, MINI. And I think it's a 30 page PDF on like 6 steps that you can take to kind of plan your mini retirement. It works through a lot of the logistics, how to create a dream price list, how to like figure out the budget for this, how to start to save for it, how to take time off. Or if you're really interested in the life planning stuff, jillianjohnsrud.com/intentional. And thousands of people have gone through this. And it's a free 10-day video course with worksheets. It's 10 different exercises. And it's so fun. Like at an event, almost for sure, someone will come up to me and tell me about them going through these exercises and just how it changed their life, which is incredible. So either of those would be helpful.
Well, let me just ask you this, just for people that are maybe interested in both. They're interested in this PDF that they can do that will actually encourage them to build out this dream board for what this mini retirement, but maybe they want to take out a pre-filled version and bring it to the retreat at some point. If someone goes to jillianjohnsrud.com/mini and they get that PDF document, will they also be able to get information about the retreat using that same link?
Yeah, either of those opt-ins, you'll get an email about the retreat. We're over halfway sold out. So if that's something you're interested in, I would definitely look into it and make some travel plans. Use some of those reward points.
That's right. We'll see you in Montana, and it is this fall. I believe it's happening in the first or second week of October. Is that right?
The last 2 days of September, first 2 days of October.
Awesome. Jillian, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This is a massively underutilized tool.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so passionate about mini retirement, so this has been awesome.
All right, my friend, if you got value from today's episode, then just, maybe share it with a friend or family member. But most importantly, go through this exercise, go through this process. When I look back at inflection points on my own journey, I didn't have the language that Jillian was describing, 3 or 4 years ago. I was just on the path to FI. But the actual actions I took that radically transformed my life was a mini retirement that I never came back from. So just think about that and what that might look like for you. The fire is spreading, my friends. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.